Hey everyone, Cleo here, and today I'm coming at you with a video about the 10 oldest books on my Goodreads TBR. Now I don't have a track of when I added books onto my shelves back here. I hope to be doing that in the future, so from now on, whenever I buy a book I want to immediately add it to my Goodreads TBR and to add the information of when I bought it, but so I don't have that, so I cannot tell you which ones have been on my shelves for the longest, sadly, but I can tell you the ones that I've added to Goodreads the longest. The idea behind this is that I want to get the 3 books that have been on there the longest done in 2020. If I get any others done, perfect, but some of these aren't actually released yet. So in terms of time frame we're looking at here is they were all added between 2011 and 2014. This doesn't mean that there weren't any other books that I read that I added in that year, but either those books have been removed from my Goodreads TBR in the meantime, or I've read them. So for example, War and Peace was one of the oldest books on my TBR, but I read that in August this year, so that is no longer on there. But so this is the status as of this moment, like going into 2020, I will have these books left on my TBR, which have been there for the longest. So I'm going from the 10th oldest books on there to the oldest book on there. So the 10th one is Annihilation by Jeff Vandermeer. I added this book in April 2014. There's since been a movie about it, and I've seen the movie actually already. I haven't read the book, but I've heard that it's really not necessary to I've heard that they're pretty much standalone. Basically, the way that the director for Annihilation works is he reads the book and then he reads it only once, and then based off his reading from that book for one time, he makes his adaptation. So the adaptation can be very loosely inspired on the book in that sense. It's very much more of a touching around and getting at the essence of the book, getting of a sense of like what it was like to read it, more than it's actually a true more than it's like a word per word adaptation. So that has been a criticism of the movie, but I have found that when I see the movie first and I read the book later, then I actually enjoy both, so maybe this is in my favor. So Annihilation is basically a sci-fi, and it's supposed to be about it's a group of scientists going out into a part of the world where like people have been disappearing, and so they're actually going in search of the previous group who went in there. I think they were soldiers, and at least in the movie, like one of these scientists is actually the wife of one of these soldiers, and they stumble upon very weird stuff out there. And so yeah, I have heard very good things about Annihilation by Jeff Vandermeer, but it seems to be this sort of like you love it or you hate it thing. The movie also stands very much apart from the book, which I think is good, but that doesn't really give me an indication of whether I'm going to like the book or not. But so this is the 10th oldest book on my TBR. Next up we have one that I actually have on my shelf. So the 9th oldest books on my TBR was added a few days earlier, also April 2014, and that is Howl's Moving Castle by Diana Wynne Jones. Also one for which I have already seen the movie, but I haven't read the book, and also one for which I hear that the movie and the book are very different. So Howl's Moving Castle is a movie done by Studio Ghibli. Very much a Studio Ghibli fan, and I love the sort of whimsy of Howl's Moving Castle. Don't know too much about the way that Howl's Moving Castle, the book, diverges from Howl's Moving Castle, the movie, but I'm very much intrigued in any case, because I like the sort of like magic and whimsy of the movie, and I hope that at least in some sense this is going to be found back in the book. Next up, so number 8, the 8th oldest book on my TBR, is also added on that same day in April 2014, and is The Brief Wondrous Life of Oscar Wilde. So this book has been on my shelf only a year or something. A friend of mine has actually recently read it, and she absolutely loved this book, so I'm hoping to love it as well. It's about a Dominican family in the US, but I don't really know too much about it anymore. But she said that it's absolutely a page turner, you fly through it, and that's really wonderful, and so I'm really looking forward to getting around to this book at some point. Next up, so number 7 in the ranking is The Garden of Evening Mist by Twang. This is a book that I own on my Kindle. It was added in 2013 and I must say that I don't know too much about it. I've briefly looked at the premise. It's about a girl who has survived the Japanese internment camp, and she stumbles upon this gardener in the place where she's living now, and he kind of takes her on as his apprentice, but I don't really know too much more about it. I guess it's going to be a lot about her experience in the concentration camp, and there's apparently also sort of like mystery surrounding how she survived the internment camp. Next up, so the number 6 on the list is The House on the Strand by Daphne du Maurier. For this one I can definitely say that this is not going to be a priority for me, just because I have another Daphne du Maurier on my shelf, which is probably going to be read first before I get to House on the Strand. Now, Daphne du Maurier, you might know her name as the author of Rebecca and My Cousin Rachel. So I really loved Rebecca, I really loved My Cousin Rachel. I think there's a movie coming out for Rebecca next year actually as well. So if you haven't gotten around to it, I definitely recommend it, because Rebecca is one of my all-time favorite books. So Daphne du Maurier does mysterious very well. She always has like the 2 books that I read by her were like mysteries with sort of like a noir setting a little bit, almost like a gothic setting even, you know, a little bit of the like the mystery behind the female characters is always there. So it's always like in these sort of like big mansions, there seems to be like some sort of a dark past to most of these linked to female characters in the books. For The House on the Strand seems to be a very different book in that sense. It seems to be more of a time travel novel, which is also something that I want to read more of, because all of the time travel novels I've read I've really enjoyed, and so I want to be getting around to more of them. So House on the Strand will definitely stay on my radar. It's just not going to be one of my priorities for 2020. So next up, on position number 5, Doors of Stone by Patrick Rothfuss. So for those of you who hear this and think, yeah, then you already know. So Doors of Stone is the 3rd book in a trilogy, fantasy trilogy by Patrick Rothfuss. First book is Name of the Wind. Name of the Wind is often considered to be one of the most beautiful fantasy novels written in recent history. It is indeed a beautiful novel. I absolutely loved it. I flew through it. I thought it was beautiful. The scene in which he's playing the lute, I think it is, that he's playing, is really one of my favorite scenes in fantasy novels recently. But it has been forever. Second book was also a huge letdown, by the way. Don't remember much of what happened in the second book even, so I actually have to reread it whenever the 3rd book is going to come out. There are rumors that the 3rd book is coming out in 2020, but I don't really trust them, you know. A year in advance, for a book to be published in 2020, it means it would have to be finished in 2019. Which means that they could already give an official statement of it coming out in 2020, which they haven't done. And I don't think that there's really any sort of marketing strategy that would keep them from saying, like, this is coming out in 2020. So the release of the Testaments has been widely considered to be one of the most hyped releases in recent history. You could easily do that for Doors of Stone for fantasy fans, and so I would think that if it is indeed going to be coming out in August 2020, that we would already know at this point. So I think that those hints are fake basically, and I don't think it's coming out, but I'll be happy to prove them wrong on this sense if it means that I'm finally getting this book, which in 2012 I added to my TBR. 4th book on the list is 1984 by George Orwell. I know I still have not read this classic. I really need to get around to it at some point. You know, it's not a priority for me this year because, as I said, I'm going to give priority to the 3 oldest one. But know that if it's not coming out, if it's not being read in 2020, that'll mean that I'll put it on my 2021 TBR most likely. Which, yeah, if Doors of Stone isn't published in 2020, that means 2021 TBR is going to have to skip over it unless it's going to be published. Yeah, I am bitter about it, I know. So 1984, yeah, basically I don't know too much about it. It's a classic. It's supposed to be a bit like, I think it's supposed to be like in the strain of like Big Brother, very much a commentary on society and on like the way in which society tries to control its population, but I'm actually really not sure about that, so I could be totally wrong about it. But so yeah, really one of the books that I need to get around to. third up, and so unnumbered position 3, and so one of the books that I definitely want to be getting around to this year is A Confederacy of Duncers by John Kennedy Toole. As for all of these books starting from 1984, I added them to that list so long ago that I don't remember what they're about. But so Confederacy of Duncers is also one of these books that is constantly on list of greatest books of all times. That's probably the way it got onto that list, and that's probably the only reason why it stayed on there. Because usually when I'm going through the list and I'm trying to see like, and I'm trying to reduce it, anything that I don't know what it's about anymore gets removed off of that list without a moment's hesitation. But I kept this one on there because of the fact that it's always on like must-read lists and things like that. So I'm definitely getting around to it in 2020. So this is getting read. Also, number 2 on my list, Slaughterhouse-Five by Vonnegut. Described as one of the greatest anti-war novels of all times. I do not physically own it, but it is getting read in 2020. And then the oldest book left on my shelf, one that I added in 2011, is Catch-22 by Joseph Heller, also getting read in 2020. So these 3 books are the ones that you can look forward to me reading in 2020, which is Catch-22, A Confederacy of Duncers, and Slaughterhouse-Five. I hope to maybe be able to reduce some of these other books from the list, but I won't commit to them in any case. If Doors of Stone is getting released in 2020, I'm reading it, but I would be surprised. But so yeah, let me know down below if you've read any of these books and if you think like, yeah, you need to stop procrastinating on them and you need to be getting around to them in 2020. Definitely let me know down below if there are any for which you were like, nah, it's actually totally overrated and actually just scrap it from your TBR altogether. Definitely let me know as well, and I will take that into consideration. So yeah, definitely let me know down below if you would want another video of like some of the oldest books on my TBR, maybe some of the newest books on my TBR. Let me know down below and I'll see what I can do. But so yeah, see you guys.